Hi, didn't see you there. I don't know if you can tell, but I did some, decorating in here, so I'm basically a real YouTuber now. Saying the internet is crazy is basically the equivalent of saying that we live in a society. I mean, yeah, it's pretty obvious that things are gonna get kind of wild once you give people more access to each other's social lives than literally ever before. Still, it's very easy to find myself incredibly invested in some mindless drama related to an internet micro-celebrity in the middle of a beautiful day before putting my phone down and coming to the exact realization I'm sure everyone with Wi-Fi has come to at this point. The internet is crazy. Over the past few weeks now, I've found myself deeply ingrained in a niche internet debate over a micro-celebrity called Ebaycarson, or Carson, since I'm not going to say that many syllables and nobody can force me to. Yes, I realize how seemingly pointless it is, but I think that how Carson has been treated and how it operates online says a lot about general internet cultures, especially within subcultures that have always been treated as the outcasts. If you aren't a furry or somebody into that culture, you probably don't know who Ebaycarson is. Even if you are, there's a strong chance you still don't know who it is. Put simply, it is a content creator who mainly posts related to furry culture, scene culture, and generally the alternative fashion and music community. I, as a person both into furry stuff, not in that way, and alternative music, was immediately drawn to Carson, just because he seemed like an interesting character, type of person I'd see while walking out and about and make a mental note to dress like. Ebaycarson, from an outsider's perspective, seems to be a good and well-meaning person. Yes, I realize this is crazy parasocial, but what I'm trying to say is that unlike artists such as Ye or Melanie Martinez, I don't really feel directly uncomfortable due to their actions with supporting them. Carson could be an awful person behind the camera, and there are some allegations we'll get to later, but at the very least, he doesn't seem to be irredeemable. For a while, I didn't know there was any controversy surrounding it, but once I heard there was something, the slightest bit of internet sleuthing led to a massive pile of dung that was just waiting there to be discovered by me. The worst allegation behind Carson's name is racism, which is pretty heavy, so I have to give a warning for that. But the first thing I wanted to discuss is something a bit more lighthearted, and also something I've meant to talk about on this channel for a while: poser culture. Poser culture has pretty much always been a large part of rock subgenres, mainly punk music. If you were only into a few punk bands and they were popular, you're a poser. If you struggled to name 5 songs under pressure, you're a poser. If you were Ebaycarson, you are a poser, attempting to take over the subculture known as scene. But how, Aspen? You might be asking your screen right now. First of all, you need to stop talking to your screen. We're gonna have to put you in a home, Nana. The reasoning behind the removal of Carson from scene culture is honestly quite moronic in my opinion, but give me a second to define some things so I can properly explain how. I was trying to find a good definition for poser, and I think this one from Random? I'm not even gonna try and say that. Works for this essay. To be a poser was to adopt all the trappings of a particular subculture without any of the substance. Keep in mind how the key of turning into a poser is a lack of any substance. We also need to define scene, and for some reason there aren't any reputable sources talking about this, so we're gonna have to go with this definition from the Aesthetics Wiki. The subculture's aesthetic is characterized by brightly colored skinny jeans, band t-shirts, and an iconic hairstyle featuring heavily teased, layered, and straightened hair, often dyed with neon streaks or raccoon tail stripes and complemented by heavy eyeliner. Now we have what scene is, and we have what a poser is. Perfect. Let's take a look at Carson. His fashion is very colorful, inspired by the early internet and MySpace era, and he has very bright and colorful hair. I wonder if I've heard anything relating to that definition before. When I try and find what Carson's style will be described as otherwise from scene, I get this one answer, color puke. Number 1, that's what happens to me when I eat too many Lucky Charms, and number 2, I decided to look at what roots the color puke style has, and it looks like it has a lot of overlap with scene. I wonder if this is gonna be a pattern, and I'm setting that up through clever writing. I'm so smart. I mean, you have the obvious connections to rave culture and rave music, the similar icons and symbols such as Gurr from Invader Zim, the classic, and the interesting typing quirks that definitely do not make my brain feel like it is imploding whenever I'm reading them. Cool, right? There's one image that I've seen floating around that kind of says everything I don't necessarily agree with when it comes to this debate online, and it's this one. I don't know why I moved to the side. I'm probably just gonna put it on screen over myself. The figure on the left is clearly meant to be the perfect scene ideal, down to the last detail of what the gatekeeper, we'll get to that term later, thinks scene should be. And on the right, it's meant to be, it's not even subtle. It's definitely a shot at Carson. If you've ever seen it, it's clear that this image was made in response to the community's questions about how exactly to categorize Carson. However, as the comments under a Reddit post featuring the image point out, it's not usually as clear-cut as that. One of my favorite quotes is from user GingerAnagram69. Wow. I'm really citing Reddit like a credible source. What am I doing with my life?
Not accurate. Scene used to encompass all parts of it, while the core, which is the style, not accurate. Scene used to encompass all parts of it, while the core of it, the style, is almost like a mixture of goth / emo / metal hair. The rainbows and the specific trends that arose from it, like the pictured Invader Zim style, especially that one, are still just scene. Breaking it all down into smaller and smaller boxes is detrimental and divisive outside of relevantly themed events.
What is the purpose of this style separation? What purpose does it have, especially when each person will have their own original spin on the style? We'll get to that, but first, allow me to take a different route to another aspect of this culture. Let's focus on music. Since I have a lot more experience with music, I've talked about it a lot more on my channel, and overall, I care a lot more about music than I do about fashion. Scene seems turning into Eminem, no! Scene seems to have roots in hardcore music, electronic, and it also spawned from emo, so you get a lot of that influence in songs created by scene artists. Overall, you actually get a really interesting musical makeup, as with many genres that came out of the internet. It's way easier to find interesting and innovative projects from new and upcoming artists online, so plenty of people get access to genres and fusions of genres and fusions of genres that are now fixtures of modern-day subcultures. Isn't that cool? Isn't that wholesome? Why am I doing this? Carson has definitely shown what music they're into, so let's check that out from one of their Spotify raps from a couple years ago. Let's take a look. So, apparently it listens to a lot of Barely Human with a 6, Male Pup, which I have some friends who are into Male Pup in them. Oh no. Don't make me talk about Lil Darkie. Lil Darkie is provably a racist. He's a non-African American man who uses the N-word in, like, a lot of songs. We'll get to him when I address the Carson racism stuff, but I just want to go ahead and make my disdain for Lil Darkie very clear. This is a sweaty, disgusting Monster Energy fueled Aspen here, and I was looking through, just checking my sources, and I can't find out if the image I showed for Carson Spotify Wrapped is actually Carson's, which is confusing. So I did find a couple others, which definitely prove that it listens to Lil Darkie. Like, it hasn't even been trying to hide that. But, the other genres they listen to, my main point was the music they listen to is very heavily either A, inspired by scene music, or B, just is scene music. Like, I would argue that hyperpop is just new gen scene stuff. Yeah, I don't know. If for those of you who were like, I don't know where I find that image, I'll have the image in the doc that I'll link, but I can't tell if it's actually Carson, so just keep that in mind. I have a bunch of other ones in there too that prove the same point. But I wonder if there's any crossover between the artist Carson listens to and scene music. Oh wait, yeah, there obviously is. Barely Human and Male Pup are both electronic artists, and as someone with quite a bit of experience in the hardcore music realm, don't know why I did that, Male Pup could be categorized as hardcore. So, if Carson musically and stylistically fits into the box of scene, why is it still not being called scene? Of course, from the way the internet works, the distinction between scenecore and glitchcore and color puke and actual genuine scene are incredibly important, mainly because if you're claiming to be seen and you're not, you're harming the scene community, aren't you? But how? I was gonna split this video up into 2 days for shooting, but I'm on a roll. Let's finish this. So Carson does in fact center a lot of its content around scene music and culture and the community and furry culture. So maybe you could argue that if it doesn't know its stuff and is misrepresenting the ideas behind scene culture, there's a problem there. If only there was some proof out there that Carson has done a significant amount of research and it knows its stuff. I wish there was some evidence that he, like, I don't know, give a presentation of the history and culture of scene communities for one of its college classes or something like that. How long can I make this pause before you get mad at me? Oh wait, yeah, it did that! So, if it understands the culture, how does it misrepresent it? Also, I've been kind of bouncing around this topic, but what is scenecore? Oh boy, it's time to go back to that same aesthetics wiki article. In another quote,
on TikTok, a distinct style known as scenecore emerged, characterized by an exaggerated interpretation of scene culture, influenced by scene electropop and SoundCloud digicore music, sharing visual similarities with the Candy Raver style.
So, I don't dress up as scene, but I have some friends close to the scene. Wow, I'm never saying that again. To me, this just seems like still scene? Let me explain. No culture has ever stayed stagnant and unchanging, especially one based purely on art and expression, like scene is. Scenecore, in my opinion, is just scene evolving and changing with the times, and people not wanting to accept the change happening in that culture. Scenecore is not a separate culture, but an evolution of the same thing. Yes, it's more exaggerated, but people can exaggerate their styles however they want and fit into the same style, right? Like, if one emo person is, like, kinda dresses up as emo, like, still got the stuff, like, you can tell, but then another person just, like, goes all out. Are they both still not emo, or is one emo and one emo core? Please don't tell me emo core exists. So scene, while it did separate itself from emo, is different, because they're based on different ideas and musical styles, whereas scene and scene core are both just kind of based off the same music and styles. Scenecore does not need to separate itself. It is the same thing. While scenecore is an exaggerated form of scene, they are not different at their core, and they should be treated as different spins on the same style. People are free to exaggerate the style as much as they want without having to drastically change their label and be kicked from certain communities for being too scenecore. Of course, scene's gonna look different as it's passed on, and internet culture changes, and music changes, and if you're surprised by that change, you must just not have a concept of how culture works. That's also why emo looks different now from how it did in the 2000s. What purpose does the label of scenecore serve? Well, it all comes back to one of my least favorite parts of music discourse, gatekeepers! Allow me to share a little hot take, from me to you. Gatekeeping is more harmful than posers are to modern day music discourse. Gatekeeping is the act of using barriers, oftentimes arbitrary ones, to keep people out of a community. I've touched on this topic in my previous work, namely the video essay I made a while back about the name 5 songs problem. However, people being asked to name 5 songs because they wore a Nirvana shirt is only one facet of a much larger issue in music that I see constantly. Gatekeeping, in my opinion, is scummy, childlike behavior akin to stopping another kid at the playground from going down the slide unless they know your secret password. Its entire purpose is to make people feel less valid in their enjoyment of a certain genre or style or musician, all for the sake of keeping so-called posers out of the conversation. It isn't actually any meaningful discussion for the most part, just a move to gain some sense of superiority and claim your title as a real fan. Plenty of subcultures have passionate gatekeepers, but scene and the subgenres close to it are particularly awful. Trust me, as a fan of alternative and hardcore music, I would know. Carson has faced a wild amount of hate online for the meaningless differences between it and real scene culture. While researching for this essay, it was easier to find gatekeepers complaining about how Carson was color puke or whatever than it was to find the racism allegations, which in my opinion is far more important than whether or not Carson is color puke. The real question I was left with after all this mindless discussion about what authentic scene means is how any of it mattered. While a nihilist would argue that actually nothing matters because we live in a society, blah blah blah, and we're formed by expectations and we're just a clump of cells. Oh god! This bickering about microscopic differences between subcultures really feels like a steaming hot bowl of nothing soup. Why does it matter if Carson, or anyone else for that matter, is scene or scene core? Why is the way someone else dresses and labels themselves matter. I'm saying them because it isn't just Carson who's felt the brunt of this. Everybody in the community seems to have a distaste for those who aren't their perfect image of what scene means. I can acknowledge how gatekeeping can kind of serve a purpose, though. According to Lily Torreja, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, from the Foothill Dragon Press, music is a societal staple that every generation, future and past, has had access to and relied on. It lends listeners a chosen ambience, a sonic refuge for cumbersome emotions, and a beautiful connection between an individual and a larger culture or community. Thus, hesitancy and utter avoidance is common when deciding to recommend lesser-known music because of their deeply personal meanings from specific pinpoints of life. This article actually gives a really interesting explanation for why gatekeeping is such a common thing to see on the internet. Music is incredibly important to so many people, including myself, and there's a strong urge to protect it from people that don't love it like you do. Instead of gatekeeping, some choose to see their actions as safeguarding from the mainstream media to protect it from becoming just another TikTok audio instead of being understood on a deeper level. I get that. I really honestly do. If one of my favorite albums that's a little bit more niche, like Chit Chat by OK Cool, was given more success and got taken for granted, it would kind of piss me off. On the other hand, this safeguarding will often just push away people who actually do have that love for the music. Nobody wants to be a part of a fan base made up of assholes. I'm sure a ton of people that genuinely enjoy scene and scene fashion are going as hard as they are on Carson because, I mean, he's one of the most popular content creators that are a part of that community, and he has quite a substantial following. In scene, emo, and furry culture, people are often cast away and bullied for being outsiders, so it feels wrong when somebody else is making money from the same thing that led to you being ostracized. I'm sure that for some people, gatekeeping comes from a certain level of envy. In a phenomenal video essay by ContraPoints called Envy, ContraPoints, she explains that envy is basically the feeling of, if I can't have X, then nobody should. It feels like some, though not all, of the critique launched at Carson follows this logic. If I can't express myself within a niche subculture and be loved for it, nobody can. Honestly, I kind of feel the same. I wish I could make a non-zero amount of money just from dressing cool on the internet. It isn't fully fair, and so it makes a lot of sense to look for something to be mad at. Poser culture is incredibly stupid, and I hope I'm able to accurately convey that. It only serves to boost the gatekeeper's ego and remove people from online communities for no reason. It's also usually targeted at minorities, which Carson is. In a wonderful article by Vi Darling with one of the most awful comments I've ever seen. Like, this is the one comment on this article when I found it. Hey, if that person is somehow watching this, get a life. In her article, at one point, she says that
if you don't know certain bands, or wear certain clothes, or know all the lyrics, you're a poser. You're an outsider trying to get in. You're an enemy, and enemies of the colony must be dominated at all costs.
She makes this argument that poser culture is often used as a form of colonial violence, which I think is incredibly interesting. She brings in some very interesting ideas to play about how poser culture is often used to put certain individuals into boxes, specifically minorities. If you're a white person in a group you've filled with white people, you might attempt to cast out any person of color attempting to liken themselves to you or partake in music you enjoy. It doesn't just happen to people of color, though. It can happen to any other given minority group, and while I'd say it's disproportionately targeted to people of color, it isn't far-fetched at all that there can be an element of discrimination at play when considering this discourse. There are actual criticisms to make about Carson, though, including the topic I've been kind of maneuvering around awkwardly, the allegations of racism. Before I even attempt to analyze this, I have to acknowledge that I'm white. Being white, I've never had anyone be racist to me. I don't understand what that's like. However, I will still attempt to properly analyze Carson's actions and alleged actions regardless. The first and most evidence-based allegation of racism comes from a video with audio of, like, pots and pans banging, basically, and just, like, bad music. The joke being that that's what Carson thinks most rap sounds like. Again, and I can't emphasize this enough, this post is coming from a Lil Darkie fan. You don't get to have an opinion on hip-hop if you listen to Lil Darkie. I guess now that I bring it up, it's important to actually look at why the support of Lil Darkie is questionable, and maybe gives a bit more weight to the whole Carson racism thing. I hadn't had that much experience with him until recently when I saw a kid at my school wearing some of his merchandise. He also just kept coming up on my algorithm, and eventually I was like, screw it, maybe I'll like this guy, and I checked him out. It's not very good. So, long story short, he's got the standard edgelord bars. One of his most popular songs is called Holocaust. Including his use of the N-word. He is not, in fact, African American, despite the fact that there was apparently a rumor spread throughout, like, his Reddit or something, saying that he's half black. That's not true. He's Indian. I might be white, but guys, I don't think he gets the pass. If you don't think that alone is bad, which I don't understand why you wouldn't personally, but whatever. If you don't think that's bad, look at this character that's all over his promotion. Come on, dude, this is too easy. This would be weird alone, but combined with the fact that he goes by Lil Darkie, which feels scummy for me to say, and this dude is clearly just not very amazing to support. His fans will often defend him with the fact that the N-word is just a word. And his fans will often defend him with the fact that the N-word is just a word, which is one of the stupidest things I've ever heard. Yes, the N-word is a word. That's kind of how words work. However, this does not mean that the word has no meaning. This word has been used for generations to target specifically black individuals in a specifically derogatory way. Every word's meaning gives it a certain amount of power and influence. Yes, free speech is incredibly important, and that technically gives him the right within the Constitution to say it. Free speech, though, also gives me the power to say that Lil Darkie is a dipshit, and maybe, just maybe, considering everything I've said, might not be the best to support him. I don't know. Maybe it does not make Carson seem any less racist to say, I don't like hip-hop, and one of the few hip-hop artists it listens to is a guy called Lil Darkie. If you have really good eyesight, you might have noticed that in the image of Carson I showed a while back from that rap post, the caption read, not all rap, but mostly mumble rap. I listen to some rap. This sets up something of a Mott and Bailey fallacy. Oh yeah, you better believe we're getting into logical fallacies now. I am a real video essayist. According to Wheat and Tares, the Mott and Bailey fallacy is defined as
a tactic where someone makes a bold, controversial claim, and then, when that is defeated, retreats to a related but simpler and more defensible claim, without admitting defeat on the original claim. Are you catching my drift right now? Are we on the wavelength? Are we 6ing and 7ing right now? Oh my god.
In this example, the Bailey would be that Carson believes most rap sounds awful to him. The caption, which far less people will see or care about or pay attention to, acts as the Mott. The Mott is that it's actually not most rap, just that mumble rap stuff, you know? And I listen to some rap. I have rap best friends. This video, at its simplest, is kind of clickbait, or at least that's how I see it. However, we cannot completely set it aside as being based upon beliefs Carson doesn't hold. It is clearly at least partially saying something it believes here, even though that belief might have been made a bit more controversial for the sake of getting a couple more views. More people are going to click on something like this than they would on something like, I don't know guys, I maybe just don't like this one specific facet of hip-hop that much. I don't think people care that much about something like that. As much as I've seen the image of Carson with that confused face on and the text above reading how I don't actually like most rap. Wait, not like most rap, like not like most rap, like most rap. It's like the rap which I don't like. You know, I don't like the rap that is the rap I don't like. It's caption exclusive information, by the way. I've mainly seen this image on drama YouTube. My goal with this essay is to go as far as I can from those videos. This is not for simple consumption where you can walk away with the simple concept of Carson good, Carson bad. I want to discuss the ideas behind what happened, what was said, and the backlash to what happened, the backlash to what was said about what happened about the backlash. With that said, I think the caption actually has one term which has become very important to hip-hop discourse: mumble rap. In all those drama videos I mentioned, I often heard people throw around something along the lines of, "It says mumble rap," which is, I've heard somewhere, a racist term. It pisses me off personally because it feels like another hot and steamy serving of nothing soup. Mumble rap, in my opinion, as a fan of hip-hop and rap, is not a racist term, and is just the name of a certain subgenre within rap. My personal definition would be a style of rap where the person or persons rapping are mumbling. It's kind of in the name. I don't think I need to explain it too much. I will acknowledge that mumble rap has been used in a negative connotation to bully some artists, particularly in the 2010s, when SoundCloud rap became more popular and led to a large increase in mumble rap. This label would often lead to musicians being discounted as a part of this group that was destroying rap culture. Wow, it's almost like people, regardless of genre or style, see change in music as bad. Crazy. I'm also not trying to say that the impact of this era was fully good, because it definitely wasn't. As usual, when something becomes popular in music, people are going to make empty, soulless copies for profit. Copies for profit? No, the Eminem, it keeps coming back to me. Especially in this era, where it was becoming easier and easier for anyone to distribute music, you see a lot of not good artists. When it becomes cheaper and more simple to release music, that means virtually anyone can do it. Which means anyone can do it. You're starting to get my point here. There are artists that I would consider mumble rappers, because they mumble when they're rapping, that are actually really good. For example, Earl Sweatshirt. The issue is the connotation and how restrictive the label can often be. So, this rap post from Carson was kind of clickbaity and dumb, but I wouldn't necessarily say racist. Yes, rap started in the US as a black art form, and it's been mainly black rappers and Mr. Mom Spaghetti himself who have had a significant amount of popularity and influence, but saying you don't like hip-hop that much is okay, in my opinion. The issue, once again, is how you say it and how you see it. If you hate it because it's thug music, then yeah, that's probably pretty racist, buddy. You might want to stop. If you don't like it sonically or something, or you just don't go out of your way to listen to it that much, you don't have to listen to it. No one's gonna force you down and be like, listen to the blueprint! I think the one major problem that would lead people to thinking that the post was racist was the antagonistic relationship it has with rap. It is not just simply stating Carson's opinion, but doing so in an intentionally inflammatory manner. I can't stop. Saying that rap sounds as horrendous as the audio is obviously not going to be taken very kindly by the general public, and that's exactly how the Mott and Bailey accomplishes what it does. The Bailey is sure to end up becoming a story important enough in the subculture that a couple of nerdy teens decide to make video essays about it. The Mott is at best a lukewarm take to be met with pretty much crickets. Somehow, though, I'm still not done yapping! Somebody stop me! There are somehow more specifically racism-related Carson allegations. Which probably doesn't say anything too good about Carson. Alright, I'm gonna have to get a little bit serious for this part, but I'm going to leave a link in my description, as I do with all my sources, to a very important straw page I will be referencing for the rest of this conversation. But I do want to give a proper warning. There are quite a few racial slurs pictured in the images shown in the straw page. Be warned, seriously. If that stuff's gonna put you off, you don't have to ingest it. It's up to you. So I don't want to show too many of these images to avoid this video having to go into review or something, but this sucks on a lot of levels. So for those of you that didn't look at the page, okay, these are Discord screenshots, because it's always Discord, where Carson is dropping a dictionary's worth of slurs, specifically racial ones, which they have no right to say. These images were disproven in a post Carson made linking a Google Doc, which basically, for me at least, got rid of much of the suspicion behind this. Side note, I find it very funny. The document is called, false allegations doc. But even with spell check existing, Carson spelled allegations wrong. I know. No shade. But it's kind of funny. I can't be talking, though. I accidentally spelled the te at least 16 times when writing this script. So, Why would somebody do this to Carson? Now that we know it was made by an outside force, why would someone be angry enough to do that? I can't actually think of a solid reason after all this time. Could it have been over the fact that Carson is harming the community? Yeah, I guess, but that isn't a good enough answer for me. The one reason I have is kind of just a cop-out for general criticism, which sums up to, some people on the internet are weird. I mean, yeah, obviously people are weird. How would the internet be fun if we couldn't all be a little bit weird? Going back to what I said in the beginning, I had a moment while writing this where I just needed to take a break. Why does anything that Carson does online matter that much? The truth for why everyone cares so much is that even without a good reason to any of it, the drama of it all is fun to indulge in. Especially with dramas like this, where there's a vague gesture in the direction of societal problems, in this case racism. It makes people feel like they are doing any sort of activism while not having to engage in any actual politics. I would bet serious money that a lot of the people talking the most about the alleged racism of Ebaycarson don't actually do any real activism. This is what we're focusing on, guys? It's all for the illusion of chipping in, and it's a pretty big ego boost, too. I would like somebody to show me how the public's view on racism changed with this discourse. I'm waiting. Show me right now, through the screen. Punch your hand through my camera when I'm recording this probably like 3 weeks ago. And it's quite fun to ignore the tragedies of everyday life while you research a furry who you don't know and why they're secretly evil. At least it's fun compared to actually sitting down and trying to make any genuine change in the world. I'm not trying to seem better. That goes for me too. After all, I wrote like 5,000 words about said furry. Honestly been really disheartening to write. I mean, it's sad to see creators like Carson come under fire with no sense of morals or ethics, especially when it gives some pretty underrepresented subcultures a more mainstream audience. I, for a long time, have been horrified by the concept of wearing anything openly flamboyant in public or attending something like a furry convention, and Carson doing those things I wish I could feel good about, it's kind of inspiring. I and so many others have heard, participated in, or directly experienced the outcasting of people from the communities that Carson represents, endorses, and supports. It's incredible to have figures that show people that there is the space for them. It's also nice because a lot of furries and people interested in scene culture are queer, and as a non-binary individual, it's good that people can feel welcome in spaces where they can unite with other people over common interests. That's really important to me. It all feels less welcome, though, when those very communities are tearing themselves apart trying to abide by a strict code. That sucks a lot. At the end of the day, I don't know Carson. What I do know is the effect that subcultures have on themselves as they become increasingly more and more toxic and build more and more walls to keep out an imaginary outsider. If you think you're seen, good for you. You probably look sick. If you don't think you're seen, you probably still look sick. Good for you. Either way, I hope that there's a community out there for you when you need it. Thank you for watching.